Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sustaining the Herd podcast, brought to you by Agri-Services and Engineering of Raymond, Nebraska. I'm your host, Brock Vitek, joined by my co-host, Andrew Wadle. We're excited to be back with you again for the second episode of Season 2 of Sustaining the Herd. For all of our returning listeners, thank you for choosing to join us once again. And for all of our new listeners who may be joining for your first ever episode of our podcast, or those who have been around for just a couple or a few episodes, we're so glad that you're with us too. And for those who may not be familiar with Sustaining the Herd, we talk about all things innovation and sustainability in animal agriculture. At Agri-Services and Engineering, we view sustainability from a holistic approach. It's clean air and water, the utilization of resources in an efficient manner, making sure that animals are healthy, making sure that businesses are successful and profitable, and finally, agriculture successfully coexisting with society in the communities in which farms operations reside. With all that being said, we are excited to have a special guest join us to talk about a fun topic, cattle feeding. With that, I would like to introduce John Schroeder from Darr Feedlot in Cozad, Nebraska. And before I hand it over to John, I would just like to say that I've had the honor of knowing John for a few years now, and he is a wonderful advocate and representative for the beef cattle industry here in Nebraska and beyond. And not to mention, John and his operation are loyal customers of ours here at Agri-Services, and we could not be more honored to have John join us on the show today. John, would you please introduce yourself?
Brock, thanks for the warm introduction. I'm John Schroeder, the general manager at Darr Feedlot. We've been in business since 1982 in a yard that brought some local owners together and decided we could do more together than we could by ourselves. And that attitude, working with the community and working for customers and taking care of cattle and having both the customer and the cattle take care of us has been a model that's worked for us here in central Nebraska. Today, we're a 48,000 head commercial feedlot in central Nebraska, making sure that we take care of cattle and have that cattle comfort that is utilizing those local resources to provide high quality protein.
Yeah, that's excellent, John. And as you look at our listeners to the podcast, it really cuts across all aspects of society. We have some cattle feeders, we have some dairy producers, we have row crop producers, as well as people in town, so to speak, and all the allied industries. And you live cattle feeding day in and day out. It's kind of like your life. And even these other people, our other listeners, they don't really know much about what it means to be a cattle feeder and exactly what is a feedlot. And so can you just boil it down to, if you even just think about it in terms of the people from town, so to speak, what do you do at a feedlot? So let's start from the very beginning all the way to the end, so to speak.
I often describe feedlots as cities for cattle, and we provide services. And just like the reasons why you would live in a big city, you want to have services of the best medical health. You want to have services, the best nutritionists and best options for nutrition. And you want to have the best options of services to maintain really comfortable settings. And so really in a feedlot, we do those three things. We've got a dietitian, basically through a nutritionist, that's designing rations to deliver the very best ration for cattle, and having their end in mind as we develop what kind of a diet that we're wanting to have them on from the very beginning, and then looking for those endpoints that we're trying to aim for to not only deliver what a consumer wants, but also when they want it too throughout the year. The other part then is the animal health side. We've got veterinarians that we work with that are on staff that come to the feed yard every day throughout the week, making sure that our process is working well. Our animal health group, our cowboys that are horseback riding through pens, making sure that we look at every individual animal and make sure that if they look different than they looked yesterday, that we're doing something about it. That's a good reason to pull them out, take a look at them, take a temperature, do a diagnosis, and make sure that we treat them with the very best animal health that we have. And we'll get into some more conversations with that, but we really use some high technology to try to get us some more tools in the toolbox to help our cowboys make the best decisions and help take care of those cattle and stay ahead of any of those issues. And then the last part is maintenance of the feedlot. We make sure that every day that those cattle are comfortable. And so having a maintenance crew that's making sure that there's always clean water ready and available is a key. And then making sure that the pen surfaces are comfortable. Sometimes that includes some bedding. But again, we talk a little bit about some of the RCC, the cement, the design of mounds and pens is something that's been around for a while, but still a technology that's been a great tool over the years to keep cattle comfortable, not only in the winter, but also in the summer, getting them up in the air and getting more airflow. So a lot of really, services for cattle is really what a feedlot's for. And so taking the local resources in that area and putting it to work to have that protein at the end is really what we do in a local area. And then, the other part we do a lot of things from a financial services standpoint to make sure that we're legally doing those things, protecting those things from a banking standpoint, financially making those things work. And then again, working with local resources and local farmers, local community members that come in and make quite a bit of positive contributions to the area by having some of those outside contractors involved. The feedlot really is a big part of a community, and again, that's we're really adding value to those resources in a local community through cattle.
And so, John, just to start at the beginning. So cattle will arrive at Darr Feedlot at what weight, and then they would leave at what weight, and how long would it take to get there?
Sure. So we typically will see some cattle that come into our commercial feedlot in that 750 to 900 pound area. We develop a lot of cattle that are lighter than that will utilize grow yards in our system, where we'll place some of those lighter cattle out into grow yards to be developed for 120 days before they come into our feedlot. Sometimes we may start some 4 or 5 weight ball and calves for 2 to 3 weeks in our feedlot and then place them out on some grazing scenarios. We plant a fair amount of cover crops behind our silage and high moisture corn in the fall of the year, and utilize a lot of those acres to graze lighter cattle and utilize some of those resources. So again, part of that is getting those cattle set up to get ready for coming into a feedlot. And I'm the first to tell people a feedlot could be a cesspool of disease. I mean, you've got a lot of different cattle that have come in from a lot of different places. It's important to have that biosecurity and do the best you can taking care of that disease load that's being presented. But let's be honest, cattle need to have some immunity built into them before they come into the feedlot, or in the human side, if you're going to the big city or going to places that might have some disease load present, you need to make sure you're vaccinated for it. So we really spend a fair amount of time with ranchers that we work with consistently to make sure that we have vaccine plans in mind to get set up and have successful immunity built as they come into the feedlot. Part of that is working with our vets that anything that we have in the feedlot that dies, we go ahead and post that. And if we can save isolates out of those samples that were taken when we're posting, we might take that to labs in Nebraska or K-State or Iowa State and take some of those isolates up to Newport Labs in Worthington, Minnesota, and build some autogenous vaccines and really get immunity built specifically for what's killing cattle at Darr Feedlot. And so by getting that immune response built up before they come into the feedlot and then boostering that again as they're in the feedlot, we've had a lot of success over the years at really having some healthier outcomes. And so I think that's making sure that we're in control of that process and then recognizing if there's differences and different things happening that we may have to change that vaccine. Again, I think that's something to just make sure that you're always in control of that process and stay ahead of a disease challenge as it's coming at you. And so, again, those are things that not only do we do at the feedlot and work real hard with it, but we also work with backgrounders and ranchers before cattle are being placed in the feedlot. So I think that's a big part of some of that success. The other thing we've tried, and this is just interesting, we've done some things with different electronic tags. We use an electronic tag in every animal that's placed in the yard. And by having that individual ID in animals, it allows us to track that health and build a database of what kind of success and challenges we've had with different locations of different origins of cattle coming into us. And so staying ahead of what we've historically seen and thinking ahead of what types of things do we need to do with this set of cattle. We've seen this scenario before. Let's make sure we stay ahead of this. Has been a nice opportunity to take advantage of. We do also have a visual ID that's unique. I think that's important to be able to not only electronically see what's going on, but visually, as you're riding through pens, have a visual tag that you can pull something and see. I like the duh factor. Duh, there's something wrong with this one. I want to be able to see what number that one is. So I think that's been a nice tool to work with. The technology is really improving, and there's a lot of things that we'll test. A lot of those things that we've tested with some of the more elaborate electronic tags, I think the science is there and that there's products that work out there as far as being able to measure temperature and measure movement in cattle, making sure that we can get our people to utilize a system like that, understand the software, and get a return on investment. Is still the area that we're still testing some of those types of tags in. And as we see more solid information that shows us return on investment, we'll do more than just dabbling in some of those technologies. But again, I'm impressed with the technology that's out there and some of those types of systems. I think that's going to have us go a long ways as we go forward. We also are playing a little bit in the DNA realm to where we've DNA'd some cattle and have sure matched up that information back to those DNA samples, and sire and dam contemporaries are kind of interesting to find where we find some information there. So the future going forward is really exciting. But at the end of the day, we feed them, we ride them, and we clean them every day, and that's still the basics that got to get accomplished, no matter what some of the technology brings back at us.
Sure. And I've got a ton of follow-up questions, but I know Brock's got some questions for you as well. But I'll come back to some of those things.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, John. John, I'd like to zoom out for a second, maybe to the 10,000-foot view, we might say, of the beef supply chain. Similar to the way Andrew served it up earlier, for the people in town, or just for those who may not be particularly familiar with cattle feeding, I'd like to ask how a feedlot and some of these other operations you described fit into the supply chain. I know a feedlot is at the end, but you mentioned the grow yard and that there might be different stages in feedlot production. Could you just paint that supply chain picture for people to visualize that process flow?
You bet. I think the important thing to remember is that we're producing food. And so we always have to think about that end consumer and what that experience is like. And so every step along the way is an opportunity to have a positive with that. And so I think you've always got to make sure that you follow those beef quality assurance, those BQA values, and stay with that core to think about that you're not producing cattle, you're producing beef. That's an important point to make. And so we really start with the cow-calf producer, and even goes before that. It goes with seed stock producers that we spend some time and work with to say, hey, what genetics are you putting out there, and who are you working with, and when you meet ranchers that are trying to buy genetics from you, what kinds of things are you thinking about, and what kind of opportunities and conversations do you want to have, of what kind of an influence you can have that'll be positive for their herd in the cow calf side, and thinking about end product. And so I think that's a great place to start. We get cattle from all over the U.S., and we've fed some cattle out of Canada over the years, even some out of Mexico, but it's been quite a few years now. But I think the important thing to think about is we have to supply beef year round for consumers. We really want to give people what they want, when they want it, when no one else can. That's really how we get a premium in this marketplace. And so as we look at that, we've got to work with cow calf producers that, calve cattle in the spring of the year, like a typical Nebraska rancher would do, but then also work with some that are starting to calve a little later in May, some that are Sandhills ranchers calving in June and July, and might come back and run those back around as yearlings. And then we're working with a lot of fall calf producers, and not a lot of them are in Nebraska. So we're working with some of those out of California, working with some of them out of Oklahoma. You do some work at different parts of the country in order to have that ratable supply throughout the year. And so because of that, you're really taking advantage of what are the local resources in each part of the country. And I was visiting with some people that were coming through the yard this weekend, and they're in eastern South Dakota, and they're running 4 acres per cow, and they've got some 1475 pushing 15 weight cows that they're maintaining that big of a cow, but they're throwing really big power calves that sure bring a lot of power through the feedlot and have a lot of gain in performance. On the flip side, we've also got some cattle in that same evening that came from a part of the country that's running 60 or 70 acres per cow. And so when you think about the scenario and what type of a cow can survive and get rebred in that scenario, it's only about a 1,250 pound cow that's out there in that part of the dry desert. And so you get into some different scenarios, and you need those different types of cattle and how you manage them to end up with an end point of still having a quality product, even though there's quite a bit different ways that they started, is something to think about. And so either way, that meat's got to be handled properly. So we need to make sure we're giving shots in the right places and taking care of those cattle, even though they're in quite a different scenario. I think that as we look at that, if you're going to breed power, you got to feed power. So I think that's as you get into some of those places that don't have some of the natural resources, you've really got to come back and follow up and manage that harder in order to get to those stages. So you end up taking some of those cattle that have got the genetics and have had the feed in front of them, and you can place those cattle in a yard, and you can start them right up on feed because they're used to it. And we market a lot of those cattle at 13 to 15 months of age. And so that's quite a bit different scenario than what you see out of some of these cattle that need quite a bit of time invested in them to grow the frame and to put the marbling in that they need, that are coming from more resourced areas that don't have quite as much feed. And so, in those types of scenarios, it's not uncommon for us to place those cattle from the ranch and go into a backgrounding yard where we go ahead and wean those, feed them a lower megacal ration, feed a 45 to maybe 52 megacal ration, and hang out for 120 days in a scenario like that. Maybe look for local opportunities to run some cattle on some corn stalks, run some cattle on cover crops, and if the timing's right, run them out on grass pasture. And so a lot of times those yearlings get set up where You're weaning those. You run them out, keeping them fairly green, try to get about a pound and a quarter, pound and a half gain, and then sorting the heavy end off to come back into the feedlot, and then taking that lighter end and running them out for summer grass, where they come off as 8.5 to 9 weight yearlings in August through October. And so again, those are different scenarios, and the beef system is really complex because there's a lot of different scenarios that fit that. But it's really about managing those resources in different parts of the country and taking advantage of that. Now, you tend to find that those cattle come back to the central part of the United States, where we've got the feed resources to finish the cattle off right. And really, here in central Nebraska, we are the sweet spot. We are the epicenter of cattle feeding in the country, in that we've got the feed resources, we've got the pack and plant capacity, we've got the drier humidity being far enough west, and yet we still got access to wet distillers grains from the ethanol plants that are close by. So it really is that 100-mile radius that's really the perfect sweet spot to feed cattle in the country. And so we see a lot of those cattle that tend to come back to this part of the world because we can cost effectively put together those rations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John, there are a couple things you mentioned I'd like to point out for our audience, a couple really powerful statements. One is that you're very clear about the fact that you're not just raising cattle or producing cattle, but you're producing food, beef. I'd like all of our listeners to really just let that sink in, that folks like John who are producing that ribeye steak that you're buying in the grocery store, they're beginning with the end in mind, wanting to provide a high quality, reliable, and safe food supply. They're not just raising cattle, but that ribeye in the package, that's what John's thinking about every day at the feedlot as producing food.
And on top of that, just to take it a step farther, what John said previously too is, they have 48,000 head of cattle, but at that same time, all 48,000 of them have eyes laid on them every day, and
Mm-hmm.
looking for ones that aren't getting up or acting differently, right, John? And then they're being called out and taken care of appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
I think just to complement the effort that goes with the people that get up every day and put the hours in and care for the cattle, there truly is a passion to take care of cattle, and know that that the efforts that they make are going to make a difference on what that consumer experience is like at the end. And I think is the more we uh, consume beef together and share that product and talk about why we get up in snowstorms and hot weather and do the things we do to make sure cattle are comfortable, that there's a reason that pays off, and that somebody out there is going to appreciate that later on.
Yep. And so we've talked about the food aspect. There's a couple outputs of your feed yard. One is clearly the food, and the other output is the output that most people have no familiarity with, and it's because you're handling it all, and your cropping partners are handling it all, and that is the manure. And so you have 48,000 head of cattle. How do you handle the manure?
Sure. So every week we're running through running box scrapers, scraping up behind the cattle, piling that up with a payloader, and hauling that manure back out into stockpiles that are then taken out to fields that get spread with manure spreaders in an agronomical rate. So again, we've got farmers that really, that manure is a 3 to 5 year investment, that the phosphorus and the potassium and the nitrogen really is something that, especially on the phosphorus side, we're getting something that's given us an advantage over 3 to 5 years. And so by by managing that and putting that out at a rate that meets those needs. And we've got a lot of fields that we will spread every 3 years, or we may spread at lighter amounts more often, but really focus on making sure that we can utilize that. And as we found, farmers have really experienced that fertilizer coming from manure, for some reason, is even got more stronger positive attributes that we don't always explain, versus just commercial fertilizer. So in combination, we find really good experiences with that we're putting that in places that have really good results. And so because of that, we've managed that to where we can get that out farther outside of that feed yard circle. That first 5 miles is an area that's a lot of opportunity, but we see that circle grow to 10, 15, 25, 30 miles outside the feedlot circle, where we've got really good use of manure in making nutrient management plans and making investments in those areas. So there's a lot of demand for manure. We tend to utilize that at Darr as more of an opportunity to leverage that with farmers that are bringing us corn and commodities in. We want to make sure we run that circle back and make sure that they've got the first opportunities to get access to that manure, so that it's an investment back in that following years of bringing the corn back into the feedlot to feed cattle. And so I think that's something that makes a pretty nice circle of opportunities working with feedlots, that those people around that area have an advantage of being able to utilize those nutrients. And so it gives them a good hammer to work with and have a competitive advantage by being closer to those feedlots.
Yeah, and it's clear that manure is viewed as a resource and not a waste, as it used to be called in the old days. And people clearly value it.
Yeah, I think that's something that's becoming more apparent, and now we see some the onsets of some of these methane digesters. We have not. We're at the early stage of some of that in the U.S. Feedlot system and the open lot system. We'll see what futures hold with some of those things, but there's definitely a difference on how we manage some of the manure pack that we get off of our dry dirt lots versus some of the cement that we're cleaning up. And so sometimes we can keep some of that manure separate that's coming off of the cement versus some that's coming off of the dirt lots. And again, because there's different attributes, there's maybe better value to haul that more intense nutrient rich soil farther away from that radius of the feedlot. So again, those types of opportunities are where more of those nutrients are needed. You can kind of identify where you strategically haul those to get the best bang for your buck when you're working with people. And so I think that's again, the more people you can work with and spread that out, it becomes more of a resource and less of a liability.
John, related to that topic, could you talk a little about the importance of managing pen conditions, as well as potentially how roller compacted concrete has become part of that conversation for you?
Sure. So the first of all, the pen conditions is something that we really take a lot of pride in, and we really want to make sure that we've got things scraped up neat and tight, and again have cattle that are have full access to get to the feed bunks to consume feed and get to the water tanks to consume water. Anything that's deterring them from getting to those two spots or getting an opportunity to lay down in a dry area is a missed opportunity. And so we'll sometimes do some bedding. We bed with a fair amount of cornstalk bedding, especially on arrival. We a lot of times do that just to get cattle comfortable when they first arrive. I don't want them walking pens and restless. It's nice to have that bedding laying down so that they come in, get a drink of water, maybe a little bite of hay, and just lay down and relax. And what I'm really wanting to see that first 2 to 3 days is I want to make sure that we get hydrated and get some water intake back in after coming into the yard, and get some feed intake so that we start getting the nutrients into the cattle, and have an opportunity to build some immunity when we give those vaccines. So again, we want to make sure that the vaccines that we're giving, that those vaccinations work, because there's proper nutrition behind those cattle and that they're hydrated. So having a clean surface that they're comfortable and getting taken care of is the first step. And so we really find that these all cement pens, and whether that's regular traditional concrete or whether that's roller compacted concrete, have been beneficial to make sure that we're got a clean surface, get an opportunity to bed that with corn stalk bedding, and some other options. We've used some wheat hay as well, and it just gives that comfort spot. And so then from there, we're also finding that there's opportunities that we really like. Some of these extended aprons. We've traditionally had about a 20-foot cement apron for cattle to come up and eat next to the bunk, and drink water out of the water tanks. Back in the 60s and 70s, we saw a lot more of those 8-foot aprons. And one thing we've learned over the last 42 years of feeding cattle at Darr is that it definitely, more cement has been a positive thing in order to keep those pens taken care of. But we're finding today that going from the 20-foot apron to close to a 60-foot apron has allowed us to feed more cattle in an area, and keep it cleaned up. And we're having more of those cattle putting more of that manure on that cement than they are on that dirt. And so having a combination of some of these pens that are 20-foot aprons, some that are 60-foot aprons, and some that are 100% concrete for shipping and receiving has been a nice mix for us. I think obviously as you pour more concrete, you spend more money doing it, so your costs go up quite a bit. But there is some concerns being on concrete the whole time they're at the feedlot, whether we see some joint stiffness, and if we definitely have to manage through that with more bedding, and making sure that that's a little bit softer footprint when we're working with them. But for receiving and shipping, that's been very adequate to work with in those more intense areas. So there's just some really neat opportunities that's come with the roller compacted concrete. It's something that's interesting that we can put it out so fast. Something that used to take us 2 weeks to pour, we can pour in 2 days with a roller compacted concrete. And for those that don't understand the roller compacted concrete, traditional concrete, we form it up with forms, bring it out in a concrete truck like you typically see going down the highway, and we're forming that up and dropping that in out of a concrete mixer truck, and screeding across that concrete surface. When it comes to roller compacted concrete, we're often setting up a concrete plant right on site, mixing that up out of the mill and dropping it into just a dump truck or a side dump, taking it to the location, dumping it, and then just using a dozer with GPS and a laser to just lay that surface out, and then coming back and rolling it with a lot of times what you'd see with cities having asphalt roads, just rolling that concrete in. And so hence it's called roller compacted concrete. Can get a lot done. It's not the level of detail that you see with the traditional concrete, but it's definitely been adequate for what we're trying to do with some of those surfaces for feeding cattle. So it's opened up some more ideas, and so I think it's a nice option to think about. Both are good, and we've got some of both, and find a good place for both. but I think that's something to look at, and depending on what your goals are. But that kind of explains a little bit of the two different types of concrete and what we use them for. Some of these high intense areas that we're going to have an awful lot of traffic on with a lot of heavy equipment, we may stick more with the traditional concrete. But we definitely find that for surfaces of feeding cattle, the RCC has been very adequate.
So, John, like a lot of industries, whether it's dairy or whatnot, I know that producers are quite private, and they like to maintain their competitive advantage, et cetera. But at the same time, when you guys are sitting around the bar having a drink or hanging out, you do discuss things. So, when cattle feeders get together, what do you guys talk about as far as what are the challenges and that folks see kind of that you're always trying to get after?
I think the thing that comes up the most is still people. We have a saying at Darr, our business, our cattle are our business, but our people make the difference. And so I think that a lot of times we really talk about how do we get engaged employees, employees that show up every day and really follow through on the details of what it takes to get those cattle comfortable, get the best animal health, the best vet experience there. I think those are things that we talk about quite a bit. Obviously, we talk about markets and having opportunities to move cattle, but I think the interaction with the people and is great. Whether it's working with suppliers that supply us cattle that are setting cattle up the right way to make us look good and have had success, or whether it's having employees that it's really fun to see them have success, learn more things, and it's a team approach. And so again, there's even though we're really fierce competitors, there's a lot of things we share with one another, especially from the food safety standpoint. Because if there's anything that ever happens in our industry with product that's not safe, it's not good for any of us. And so, if we've got something that we're seeing, we definitely share that because it's our advantage to make sure we share that with our competitors, so that we all take care of those kinds of issues that can be problems. So, I think those are some of the things that I'd highlight. But it really starts with engaged employees and engaged people in this industry that care about the livestock we're working with and respect them.
Yep, that's great. It's always about the people.
Very well said, John. Well, John, I'd like to say thank you very much for joining Andrew and I here on Sustaining the Herd for a very fun episode. I have enjoyed the conversation, as I always do with you, and have definitely learned a lot, and I'm confident that all of our listeners will enjoy this episode just as much. So thanks again for sharing your time and expertise with us.
Well, thanks for having me today.
And with all of that, for all of our listeners at home, we look forward to coming back to you again in 2 weeks with another episode of Sustaining the Herd, and you'll never guess who our guest might be. Yep, that's right, if you guess that it's John once again. We'll be back for part 2 with John to dive even deeper into some of these topics that we have touched upon today. Until then, thanks for joining the herd today.